Dear friends, we gather with broken hearts, without words, without a way to express the sense of loss that's felt in this room. We feel the loss as we see this bima, this pulpit, this sanctuary, without Rabbi Ron Aigen leading us. The pain is in his absence, and the pain is felt doubly, as we know that he would have the right words, the right ritual, the depth and the love with which he would comfort. We feel the loss as we remember, think about those many moments that he was there with an embrace, with a word of kindness and wisdom, with a steady, consoling hand to support those who needed him. We turn to Ron's family. We turn to each other. We seek comfort. We'll spend time this morning in prayer, in song, and trying to the best of our abilities to bring comfort to a bereft family, to a congregation, to a community that has lost its leader. And as we speak, we acknowledge that there are no words. The Midrash in Kohelet Rabbah describes a scene of mourning, and a sage was asked, "Are there any words of Torah that you can offer in our time of grief?" And the answer was, at a time like this, the Torah takes refuge in silence. This morning we take refuge in silence, we take refuge in prayer, we seek comfort as we reflect on an extraordinary life, on the life of Rabbi Ron Aigen, Harav Ruven Shmuel ben Yosef v'Miriam, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. Psalm 23.
מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בינות דשא ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינעלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק, ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צלמוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צורריי, בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Psalm of David. The Eternal is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Eternal settles me down in green fields and leads me by quiet waters. My soul is restored. I am guided by paths of righteousness for the sake of God's name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You soothe my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal for all the days to come. Ron was a treasured member of our community of rabbis, and there are many rabbis who have come today and are joining around the world and paying tribute to our friend. I would like to call upon now to offer the first eulogies this morning. Rabbi Michael Luckens, Rabbi Emeritus of Congregation Kerem Shalom, Concord, Massachusetts, who will be followed by Rabbi Jonathan Slater from the Institute of Jewish Spirituality, and he will be followed by Rabbi Jeff Eisenstadt, a longtime friend and a classmate of Rabbi Ron's.
How is it possible? It shouldn't be me standing here. It should be Ron, having made his place on this bima and in this kihila, 40 shana, 40 years. And so we come together this morning in shock and in grief, and really with a sense of disbelief. We've lost a man of vibrant light, a person who treasured his family and his friends, a soul who so very much loved life. And the pain we feel tears at the heart of our being. And we struggle with feelings of sadness and anger and of loss. How could this be? How is it possible that Ron is no longer here to share his deep love, his warm smile, and his sweet friendship? How is it possible that we will no longer hear his laughter, his gentle words, his Torah, and to see his smile and welcome? This was so fast, so sudden, and with no warning. Ron, if we knew you were leaving, we would have had a chance at least to say goodbye. But you left so quickly. You left so quickly. And now the vibrancy and the vitality of your soul must live within us. A stroke has taken him from us. In this week when we celebrate Mother's Day, Marilyn grieves the loss of her son. In this week when we read from Acharei Mot, Carmela has lost her loving husband and life partner. Raziel, Nadav, and Gila, and Jen have lost their incredible father. Linda, Sue, and Michael, David, and Rachel, Raquel have lost their wonderful brother. And Liam Joseph, whose voice we heard just a few moments ago, has lost his over-the-moon Saba. Sadly, a Saba he will never know in person. Nieces and nephews mourn the loss of their uncle. And of course, within this Dorshe Emet community, and within the larger Montreal community, within each of our experiences and lives, we have known Ron in so many ways, both simple and profound. And in so many ways, he has touched each of us so deeply. I lost a terrific friend. Wednesday, I emailed Ronnie and I asked him how he was doing. Thursday, he wrote to me and he said, "Every day a little better." And Friday, he was almost gone. Almost totally gone. Ech ze yitachen. How is that possible? We were students together, rabbinical students, pioneers in this Reconstructionist experiment, the opening of a rabbinical college in North Philadelphia. It was the late 60s and the early 70s, and a number of us was studying, exploring, and beginning to shape our rabbinic identities and our rabbinic careers. Ronnie and I were in some of the same classes. Jeff, you probably remember he was one of the smart kids in class. But most important, he was a friend. Most important, he was a friend. At the first graduation of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, 3 students organized what we called in those days a creative service. And Ron brought his guitar and brought his ruach and thoughtfulness and creativity to the assembled guests. And that creativity and that thoughtfulness and that neshamadik personality were some of the characteristics that he would bring here to Dorshe Emet, his first job, where he would spend 40 years, 40 shana, always teaching, always inspiring, always thoughtfully and carefully working with individuals through every part of the life cycle, through every moment in their lives, during times of joy and sorrow, times of challenge and celebration. Ronnie was always there, always present with chesed and compassion and love. And every Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah, we would be on the phone. Rabbis, you know this drill. Every Elul, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to bring to our communities? How are we going to say it? How can I say something new after being in the same place 10, 20, 30 years? And Ron would agonize about this. Not only because he was so medakdek, he was so precise and so careful and so wanting to shape everything in just the right way, but also he cared so much. And he wanted every word to be put out there with care and with love. so that it would be filled not only with Torah, but that it would be filled with his neshama, and that he would be able to connect not just words of the text, but words that come from the heart. He put his sharp and thoughtful mind as well into the beautiful Sidur and Machzor that are used here throughout the year. In our minyan at home, we use Ron's Sidur, and when we look at the Perushim on the bottom of every page, we can hear Ron's voice. We can hear Ron's voice on every page, between the lines of commentary and the beautifully translated texts. And every year, we have used a different iteration of Ron's beautiful Haggadah until finally he realized, okay, enough is enough. We can finally make this davar kavua, a set thing. And so for the last few years, we've sat around the table using this beautifully illustrated and beautifully written Haggadah. Sidarim filled with great discussion and laughter and song. Carmela, Sharon and I danced at your wedding. That's how far back we go. A wonderful occasion we'll never forget. The way you looked at each other, Chatan and Kala, on the day of your wedding, is the way that you have looked at each other through all these years. With love, with friendship, and with a deep connection. That's the way you looked at each other at these recent Sidarim that we celebrated a few weeks ago. We were all so grateful to see you and Ron holding hands, sitting at the head of the table, leading us in song. Each of us sitting around the table, so happy to see Ron post-heart attack, with you and with Marilyn and with Saba Joe's spirit, leading us out of Mitzrayim with wisdom and humor and, of course, joy. Razi and Nadav and Gila, your dad was so proud of you. I know he told you that, but he also told everybody else. You know that. And you know how much he loved you. And Jen, he was so overjoyed to welcome you into the family as his daughter. He was so overjoyed to stand under the chuppah almost 2 years ago and to be the Mesader Kiddushin, to be the father of this loving couple about to begin a new chapter of their lives. And we watched Liam Joseph's bris via webcast on our home, from our home in Boston. And we watched as Ron welcomed the newest generation of family. Urei vanim levanecha. Ron and Carmela could not stop touching and talking about the miracle of their anicle, the miracle of their new wonderful grandchild. Our families have shared so many of life's joys. And now, this morning, the tragedy of Ron's death. From singing together at Hanukkah in the midst of Montreal winters, to singing into the night at Pesach Sidarim, we cherish the time we have to spend with each other and to deepen our friendships and to be like family with each other. At your wedding, Carmela, and at Razi and Adav and Gilez Benot and Bar Mitzvah, may we continue to dance into new chapters of our lives. And yes, in time we will dance. We will dance, being present with each other in every season. A piece of us has died with Ron. A piece of Ron will always live within us. This coming Shabbat, we read from Parshat Kedoshim, a portion that deals with ethical mitzvot and moral guidance that characterize so much of Ron's personal path and professional teaching. He would want us to keep the sacred close and to live loving, spiritual lives. One year at Yizkor, Ron talked here from this bima about the idea of immortality and our responsibility to leave behind something after we die. He called that talk Ma'aseh Yadenu, the work of our hands. And in that talk, he quoted from Ray Bradbury. He said, or Ray Bradbury said, and Ron quoted, "We must all leave something behind when we die. A child, or a book, or a painting, or a house, or a wall that we've built, or a pair of shoes that we've made, or a garden that we've planted. Something that our hands have touched. Something that our hands have touched in some small way. So our soul has somewhere to go when it dies. When we die, I'm sorry. And when people look at that tree or the flower we've planted, and we are there." And then in talking about Ma'aseh Yadenu, the work of our hands, Ron quoted Psalm 90. "Uma'aseh yadenu konana alenu, uma'aseh yadenu konanehu." Let the work of our hands be established. Let the work of our hands endure. Even at the very end of his life, even after the stroke, Ron offered to those in need any of his organs that could be transplanted, to provide a kidney or a cornea, to provide sight or hope. That's who he was. Ron embodied Ma'aseh Yadenu and Ma'aseh Libenu, the work of our hands and the work of our heart. For Ron, those were one thing. I would like to close by chanting that short verse, which was the basis of Ron's Yizkor talk, and also in so many ways, the basis of his life. And so I say goodbye, my dear friend Ron. Rest in peace. Your memory will always endure. Your memory will always be a blessing. Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu.
Umasei yadeinu konen aleinu Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Aleinu.
I was supposed to be here in 3 weeks to celebrate with you all. And so I must be here now to grieve with you all. Ron was a student, a colleague, a friend through the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, a student of mine in his deep interest in Hasidic literature and its integration with mindfulness meditation. And we've studied and practiced and taught together for quite some time. And I was reminded just yesterday that Ron, a number of years ago, turned his hand to translating passages from a classic Hasidic text, the Mo'av HaShemesh of Colonimus Kalman Epstein of Krakow. I figured, let me see, what did Ron select out of all the possibilities for this coming week's Parsha of Kedoshim? What was it that drew his attention? The passage that he found to translate begins with a question. God says, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And the Mo'av HaShemesh asks the question, how's that possible, right? If God says to us, be separate, be completely distinct and cut off from the world just as I am, how is that possible for us human beings? How can we be as separate as God is? How could we possibly be as holy as God is? And how can we expect that the whole of the community of Israel could live up to that challenge? And he turns his hand, the Mo'av HaShemesh, to giving an explanation. He says that when God says, be distinct, be separated, he means not the way the pietists of old used to do it, secluding themselves in a room inside the house, closed off without windows, not talking to anybody, not seeing anybody, not speaking to anybody, devoting themselves to their own pietistic practices. But rather, the Mo'av HaShemesh says, no, you have to go out, ulitchaber im anashim tzadikim ksherim. You have to go out and connect yourselves to righteous and proper people. V'lilmod mimaseim hatovim, and to learn from their good deeds. All at the same time that you hold yourself separate and concentrating on God. So you can be connected with all these people and at the same time a recluse internally connected to God. I think that there is something in that Ron was trying to get at in himself. Because in many ways, he was the inveterate community builder. There was no place that he would rather be than with people. People in his community, whether it's in his study or in the activities that he created here, the Center for Art and for Culture and for Ethics here at his beloved congregation. To be out in the community, building community with the rest of the congregations here in town. Or as we saw Ron was also a serial program taker. And as he first was in the mindfulness leaders training, and where I met him, and then he was in the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and then he did Lev Shomeh in order to learn spiritual director training, and he was going on to do more and more things because he always wanted to learn more, but it was an opportunity to be with other people, to connect with them, to learn from them, in order to then give back to everyone else. But there was that pull also, that he found a path to, through meditation, to have some space internally that was also separate, that was also alone, where he could hitboded, where he could just be on his own and okay. And he brought that here and sat with a small number of you, but regularly, and he would teach Hasidic texts, mine and others, in order to connect the practice of sitting with Jewish life, because whatever he did, sitting quietly, was for the sake of then going out into the world. There's a piece of the teaching that the Morva Shemesh offers at the beginning, in order to set up his contrast with the pietists who would seclude themselves. He'd say, there are many ways to serve God, but the essential one is me'ahava, out of love. Love of God and love of people. And that's what drives one to then, litchaber im anashim tzadikim kshirim. Out of love, one seeks to connect with proper and upright people, to find people to live and be with, to create community with, to serve God with, to serve the Jewish people with. But it's out of God love also that one turns inward, to find that connection to the Holy One of Being, to the core of our peoplehood, but also where one turns ultimately to find love. As much as Ron wanted to sit and cultivate a sense of love, he also knew he needed to cultivate a quality of being loved. He knew that from you. He knew that from you. He knew that from all of you. But there was one person who had to agree, and that was Ron. He had to agree that he could be loved. And he practiced for that love. He practiced so that he could ultimately know it's okay just to be and not to do. That he would be okay no longer building this community, but building people nonetheless. That he'd be okay even if he wasn't the rabbi of this congregation. That he'd be okay even if he was retired and doing nothing. No, he would never do nothing. But he'd have to be okay just being Ron. And he worked hard at that because he knew that from this teaching. He taught it to me just now. Right? That if we're truly going to serve God, it has to be serving God out of love. And finally, ultimately, that love has to begin here, to know that we are loved individually in ourselves. That love that we have for ourselves doesn't then make us selfish, but frees us to serve others with love. I too, Michael, spent many hours with Ron over the years in those weeks and days before the high holidays, struggling through his sermons, which were always wonderful, to his delight and surprise. But one of the things that Ron was learning over time was that the most important piece to be in those sermons was to be Ron. Not what he thought, not an analysis, not a great idea, but what he really knew to be true in his own heart. He learned from the Morav HaShemesh that it is when we connect with love internally that we can be alone with ourselves and love internally. Then we truly can go out and build community that lasts, as it will here, as his memory will always be for us a blessing.
I'm here along with Rabbi Michael Luckins to represent Ron's life at the Rabbinical College 45 years ago. As Michael mentioned, that Ron was a star. We knew it back then. But probably what you didn't know is that along with doing creative graduate services, Ron was known to be at a mimeograph machine, always creating new readings. How many here know what mimeograph paper is? All right, all right. Ron knew it quite well, and he would be all the time wanting to do creative things with prayer. There was a place called Makom, a Jewish coffee house, where he and I got to play guitar and sing together, and we were experimenting with what Jewish spirituality could be. And for Ron and all of his classmates and all of us, it was really special. Now, 39 years ago, Ron was a young rabbi here, and he calls me up and says, "Jeff, come up and do our program. We have a retreat in St. Agath, and we go up there in the winter. It happens to be Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of Remembrance. Come up and do some stuff on memory, and we'll sing a little." All right. We didn't know what we were doing. We were young, you know. We were plowing the way. And Ron said, "But most importantly, we'll have fun together." It was Zachor. So Ron talked about what it was to have collective memory for the Jewish people. Yizkor, Zachor. What does it in fact mean to remember? But one of the things that I saw just a few moments ago in the family room is that we were going over memories. We were thinking of those personal memories, those memories that are so much a part of our neshama, of our soul, because Ron's neshama is part of us too. So today, sadly, we remember the personal and professional pieces that Ron gave to us. For me, he was a dear friend. He was a scholar and a teacher. He was a visionary. But above all, he was a mensch. He was a hiking companion, a skiing buddy, and an Israel travel chaver. Last year in Jerusalem, we hooked up to spend the night in a hotel on Shabbos. It was Friday night, and we hadn't seen each other for quite a while. So we got together, and we were up all night. We were like teenagers. We were like college kids, giggling. And you know Ron's giggle, it really just goes through those eyes would twinkle. He would giggle, and your energy would just lift up, and he lifted you up. We talked all night. Memories of us as students, our young rabbinical careers, what it means to retire, what does it mean to move on to something else. He talked about the synagogue here and all the times and the wonderful issues that he had in building here. We talked about Chadesh Yameinu and well springs. We talked about Reconstructionism and where the vision of Reconstructionism was going, Deborah. But most of all, Ron talked to you about that, I'm sure, all right? But most of all, we talked about family. Carmela, you mentioned when I walked into the room, you said whenever I came that Ron's silliness always came out. And I appreciated that because he brought that out of me. But we talked about the family. We talked about Grandma. We talked about you, Marilyn. We talked about the family, the kids that we so, although maybe 3 hours were spent on rabbinic stuff, 8 hours were spent on family. And just before Pesach, I wrote to Ron when I heard about his heart attack, and he wrote about what it felt like and what it was like, but mostly he talked about family, and he sent me beautiful pictures of that Liam, who is, as he said, Sabbahood is the most important thing. But Ron's legacy will live on. We remember his teaching, we remember his sagehood, but when Ron and I would get together, we mostly exchanged music. He would teach me a song, I would teach him a song. As a matter of fact, at our graduation in 1976, Ron and I and other classmates, we chose the song Ani va'ata nishaneh et ha'olam. You and I can change the world. Ron, you did. You made great changes. You brought things that others only dreamed of. And so I'd like to conclude with a song that Ron taught me at that retreat in that cold, snowy winter in St. Agathe. The words, V'zocher chasdei avot. Remember the loving kindness of our sages. And Ron has touched so much of what we are with his chesed, with his loving kindness, whether he taught, whether he lectured, whether he was a friend, whether he had that gleaming smile. That's the chesed that he gave to us. And because of him, our world is a little closer to Geula, to redemption. V'zocher, v'zocher, chasdei avot, umevi geula livnei v'neihem. So as we sing it, think of a memory with Ron. Think of how he touched your lives. V'zocher, v'zocher, chasdei avot, umevi geula livnei v'neihem. Yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da-da-da,
Rabbi Ron celebrated 40 years serving this congregation, and as we know, a tribute to his career was planned for June. And one of the reasons that he confided that he was looking forward to this next phase of his life was not only what it meant to him personally, but what it meant for the congregation. It meant that a new era of leadership would come in. He was excited about the possibilities that brought to the synagogue community that he loved. So I'll now call upon the incoming rabbi of Dorshei Emet, Rabbi Boris Dolan, to offer prayer and song.
A few months ago, when I first visited Dorshei Emet, we gathered together to sing Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, sung by the Israelites as they crossed the Sea of Reeds, making their way from Egypt. And as we know, as Moses, their faithful guide, led them across the dangerous waters, this song rose up in a way that a song had never risen before. bringing the entire community together in thanks to God and also for the blessing of community and for the strength that they could gain from each other. In his life, Rabbi Ron guided this community on an incredible journey through times of joy and celebration and through times of sadness and the deepest pain, always filled with the most incredible moments of learning. His vision for this community, as I have been told by so many people, was one of love and compassion, and he believed that our community life, our home life, our entire life, and our most holy of spaces should be filled with music, with study, and also with creativity. There was always room for exploration and learning a new way to see the world. There were so many sparks of inspiration, and his wisdom and his light helped guide so many people in this community. Everyone he encountered was able to find more meaning in life and to find strength from each other. There's a beautiful line from Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, that I would like to offer today as we remember Rabbi Ron and make our way through a new journey, through a journey of mourning. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayhi li lishua. God is my strength and my song and will be my salvation. May we all be guided today in our personal and our communal journeys by the mystery of life and, of course, by the love and the support of community. And may our voices remind us of the wisdom, the guidance of Rabbi Ron, and may we all know deeply in our hearts the ways that he will continue to live on in each of us. And Ron, I promise to do all that I can to hold on to your light, to your inspiration, and to your guidance. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayhi li lishua. 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 Yai nai 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 nai, yai nai nai, yai nai nai, yai yai nai nai nai, yai 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 nai nai, yai nai nai, yai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai. Yai nai nai, yai nai nai, yai nai nai, yai nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai, yai nai nai. Ozi v'zimrat ya vayhi li lishua. Ozi וזמרתיה ויהי לי לישועה.
This time we'll invite Nadav to offer words of tribute to his father.
Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, my father meditated daily in silence. And when I went to go collect his personal effects, I needed his phone. To start getting the wheels in motion for all this. So I opened the phone and I got all the contacts I needed. Then I looked at all the random apps he had. But there was one app that stood out. The Insight Timer. So please join me in a silent meditation. He set it to 8 minutes, not me. הרחמן הוא יברך את אבי מורי, בעל הבית הזה, ואת אמי מורתי, בעלת הבית הזה. אותם ואת ביתם ואת זרם ואת כל אשר להם ואת כל המסובים כאן. Compassionate One, bless my father, my teacher, the master of this house, and my mother, my teacher, the mistress of this house, all their household, together with their children and all that is theirs, and all those assembled here. And let us say amen.
Ron was always looking to learn something new, to grow, to be creative. And he became passionate about Yiddish. He learned it only in the last few years. Learned it mostly through song, but it's something that moved him deeply. So I'd like now to call upon Razel Kandib to present a Hasidic nigun and a Yiddish song.
I will sing two verses from Moshe Leib Halperin's poem, Die Sonne wird heruntergehen, the sun will set. Briefly translated, the sun will set and love will come to the lonely one who sits on a stone. The sun will set and the night will come and take us to eternal rest. And the second song that I will sing consists of two words. It's a Hasidic nigun, and the words are Unser Rabbi, our Rabbi. Please join me when I will sing the nigun. Die Sonne wird heruntergehen untern Berg, wird kommen a Stille die Liebe zu gehen, wird kommen a Stille die Liebe zu gehen. Zum Umet, wo sitzt auf a goldenem Stein und weint vor sich einer allein. Zum Umet, wo sitzt auf a goldenem Stein und weint vor sich einer allein. Die Sonne wird heruntergehen untern Berg, wird kommen die Nacht und wird singen Lulu. Wird kommen die Nacht und wird singen Lulu. Ach, über die was waren schon zu schlafen in ewiger Ruhe. Über die Augen, was waren schon zu schlafen in ewiger Ruhe. Unser revenue, unser revenue, unser revenue, unser revenue, unser revenue, 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 unser revenue, unser revenue, unser revenue. Schlaf in ewiger Ruhe und soll dir die Erde sein gering.
The family shared a beautiful memory, a mental image of Ron. He would stand at the Shabbat table, would fill the Kiddush cup until the wine was at the very top, at the rim. And he would hold the cup in his hand, and the children would stare, would marvel at how steady that hand was. His cup was full, but somehow, at his Shabbos table, he managed to never spill a drop. The full cup is, of course, the metaphor for a life of fulfillment and meaning. As we read at the beginning of the service in Psalm 23, when God is with me, my cup runneth over. And it takes a steady hand, a pure soul, a heart that's open and loving, to hold this overflowing cup of blessing with confidence, with grace. Rabbi Ron Aigen lived a life of blessing. He felt blessed by his family, his community, and his life was a blessing to so many here. I was blessed to know Ron as a friend, as a mentor, and as a chavrusa, a study partner. He loved studying Torah. It gave him vitality, life, and that spirit. As we remember his legacy, I'd like to turn to a teaching, to a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in the ethics of our fathers. It's accustomed to study Pirkei Avot on the Shabbat between Passover and Shavuot. And this past Shabbat, the Shabbat of Ron's passing, we studied the first chapter. And in that chapter, the Mishnah states in the name of Rav Yehoshua ben Prachia, Aseh lecha Rav, uknei lecha chaver, Hevedan et kol ha'adam lechaf zchut. Loosely translated, it means find a rabbi for yourself, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge everyone favorably. I read this Mishnah in the hours after saying goodbye to our dear friend. And I thought that these words beautifully describe his legacy. A rabbi, a friend who had the most open, genuinely generous way of looking at people. He was a rabbi's rabbi. His rabbinic career began at a young age. He had a low draft number in the Vietnam War. And I'm told that it was his father's suggestion that he pursue a career in the clergy. And what began as a way to avoid something, to avoid war, became something that Ron embraced with his heart, his soul, his essence. He had a love for learning, a genuine curiosity. He spent a year studying in Israel every Shabbat at the Kotel, and that was a time, the time of study, the time of growth that spiritually sustained him throughout his life. Ron was a spiritual guide to so many. He led by example. He had high ethical standards. He lived Jewish. He loved Judaism. His essence was so profoundly connected to the soul and the destiny of our people. I first studied with Ron in the context of a group of 30 rabbis who studied together at the Hartman Institute in Israel. When our group learned of Ron's passing, we began to share with each other memories and impressions. The rabbis wrote words such as, "I just spent a few moments reading his Siddur and can hear his soft voice emerging from its pages." And, "There was no kinder, nicer man. He was creative, artistic, and caring. There was no pretense or ego, just genuine caring and love. A great rabbi and teacher, accepting and thoughtful." And one rabbi wrote, "It takes a lifetime to create such a good person. And then in a moment, he is gone. Such goodness is not easily replaced, and such pain is not easily healed. It feels like a loss in the family." And I'd like to share the words of his friend Rabbi Art Green, who wrote, "From my first days at RRC, I got to know and appreciate Ron Aigen as one of the very special people within the Reconstructionist rabbinate, both as a mensch and as a spiritual leader. We quickly became allies in the task of teaching people how to treat the tradition seriously and respectfully, while at the same time always maintaining a questioning eye and an openness to the need for change. Over the years, we became friends as well, and I was honored by the fact that Ron looked to me as something of a mentor, especially around his ongoing liturgical work. I remember fondly my several visits to Dorshei Emet over the years, which always included long and deeply thoughtful conversations with Ron, and including Carmela as well. She brought him to a knowledge and awareness of religious creativity in Israel, something he had to an unusual degree among North American rabbis. His Siddur, Machzer, other liturgical creations, all beginning in the circle of the Dorshei Emet community, have had a wide influence both within and beyond the Reconstructionist movement. Some of the most religiously and literally sensitive rabbis have chosen his works for their congregations. Many others I know have drawn from them, shaping their own liturgical creativity around Ron's model. He was indeed a model and a rabbi's rabbi to many a younger colleague who had the good fortune to know him. Aseh lecha Rav. Rabbi Ron Aigen was a rabbi to so many, a beloved colleague and a friend in our community of rabbis. Uknei lecha chaver. He was a chaver. He was a friend. He had a big circle of friends. He kept his friends for life. He made friends easily because people were drawn to him. He had this unique combination of high standards on the one hand and being open and accepting on the other. He was a pleasure to be around. He had a great sense of humor. It's not that he liked to tell jokes per se. He couldn't always remember the punchlines. But he had a quick wit. He could take an embarrassing situation like a phone going off in the middle of the service, and he could turn it into a light moment, something funny and edifying. One of his favorite outlets for humor was on Purim. As the congregation would eagerly anticipate his and Carmela's often elaborate costumes On the year he became a Canadian citizen, he dressed up as a Mountie. And in the year that Raziel was born, Ron dressed up as a bee, Carmela dressed up as a flower, and Raziel the honey. I was blessed to develop a close friendship with Ron over the past number of years. It began through Carmela at Akiva School. But Ron and I spent time together in Israel. We worked together on the board of rabbis here in Montreal. And I enjoyed the time that I was blessed to spend with him. And last summer, Ron and I took a road trip together. At his initiative in Israel, we made a solidarity visit to the monastery at Tabcha, which had sadly been damaged in an arson attack by Jewish fanatics. This trip was so reflective of what Ron believed in: interfaith connection, openness, tolerance, prayer, speaking out when necessary against this type of extremism. It was a very powerful day. And our day at the monastery came to an end at around 9 p.m. Then Ron and I decided to do something adventuresome. Instead of driving directly home, we made an hour excursion out of our way to visit Tzfat, because that night was the yahrzeit of the great Kabbalist of Yitzchak Luria the Arizal. And thousands make the pilgrimage to his grave that night. And we figured it would be as it was, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We arrived in Tzfat at around 11 p.m., and by the time we hiked down that mountainside to the gravesite, it was close to midnight. And among the masses, the thousands upon thousands of Hasidic, Haredi, Yeshivish Jews, Ron and I stood together shoulder to shoulder. We sang together. We prayed. We meditated. It was a precious moment. And at a certain point, Ron began to laugh. And I laughed with him. We laughed at the absurdity of the situation. Of a Reconstructionist rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, on a midnight hike in the mystical city of Tzfat. Or perhaps I like to think that we were laughing at the absurdity of a Jewish world that might consider this friendship unusual. It was a friendship I treasured, and I joined so many who will miss our beloved friend. Aseh lecha rav uknei lecha chaver. Make for yourself a rabbi, acquire for yourself a friend. Ve'havedan et kol ha'adam l'chaf zchut. See each and every person favorably. Ron's career, his life, was dedicated to accepting people, making them feel welcome in this space and anywhere in the Jewish world. He wanted each and every Jew to know that there is a path home. He did his best through creativity, through his unique humanity, to bring Judaism within reach to those who seek it. He engaged with depth. He was spiritually strengthened by speaking about serious things, searching for truth and meaning. When he would give a class, a sermon, or teach in any way, his objective was not only to communicate material, his objective was to create discussion, to generate thought. And even as he wrote and compiled his books, he had this collaborative philosophy. He involved friends, family, members of the community. Ron would often say with great humility, he would say, "I'm not a scholar." And yet, he produced 3 works which are used around the world, which bring meaning and make Judaism accessible to so many. He brought Judaism close to anyone who was open to it. He insisted on attending the Montreal LGBT parade just to show support for the Jews who marched there. And with the same openness, he was proud that this congregation has produced a number of Orthodox rabbis. He would joke, "What did I do wrong?" But his approach to Judaism encouraged his students to follow their strengths and their own paths of meaning. Ron was a Rav, he was a friend, and he created a home and a community of openness and love. He'll be missed by his congregants, by his friends, anyone who encountered his quiet laugh, his humble smile, and his warm embrace. And of course, most of all, be missed by his family. The family shared with me that Ron was both the rock and the glue. Everyone in the family looked up to him. turned to him for guidance and advice. He was Uncle Ronnie to so many, the spiritual and emotional core. And I'd like to extend our condolences to Ron's family, to his mother, Marilyn. Marilyn shared memories that only she could remember of Ron as a young boy, compassionate, the love for animals, for people, love for the world. As the eldest of the 4 siblings, the first grandchild in the family, the first boy in a family of boys, he was a devoted, loving son, and so grateful to his mother. This Sunday on Mother's Day, Carmela approached Marilyn and thanked her. Thanked her for raising such an extraordinary human being. Thanked her for her role in all that Ron was in life. We extend our condolences to you, Marilyn. It is not the way it's supposed to be. And we pray that the Almighty grant you strength in this difficult time. Ron was an excellent big brother. When he was a young boy, his siblings even nicknamed him Daddy Junior. He was nurturing, he loved his siblings, and they shared a closeness throughout life, and we extend our condolences to Michael and Rachel and Suzanne and Linda and David. And of course, the story of Ron's life is the story of Ron and Carmela. It took them only 1 week of knowing each other before they knew that they would be married. And Carmela shared that at that point there was a negotiation. Ron asked how many children she wanted. They settled on a number. Ron asked Carmela, even though she was a vegetarian, if she would agree to cook chicken for Shabbat. Carmela said no. And for the first 2 years of their marriage, Ron made the chicken until Carmela took over the job. And before they were married, Ron asked Carmela which ketubah she preferred, a traditional one or one that was more creative. And then he said that it didn't matter which one she chose. He simply expected that they would live a life of holiness together. And they did. From the moment of their marriage in July 1978, Carmela and Ron were an amazing team, so in love, so proud of each other. When they were together at a wedding, Ron would always tell her that she was the most beautiful woman in the room. And confiding in his friends, Ron would speak with such pride, such affection, such admiration for his bride. Ron would joke that he chose Carmela because he knew she would make a great Rebbitzin. But together, they built a family, they built a community, they led, they established a home and a family of holiness. Carmela, I turn to you at this difficult time. Ron knew how strong you are, and you gave him such strength, and you were each blessed with the years that you shared. We pray that the family, the home, the community you built together will comfort you in this difficult time. We turn to Ron's children, Raziel, Gila, Nadav, and Jennifer. Ron loved his children so much. When they were younger, he was home every day for supper, never wanting to miss time with the children. He would tell them bedtime stories, and Carmela shared memories she has of the 3 children all climbing on Ron at the same time, a father surrounded by such love. His summer, as Ron and I drove in the early morning hours from Tzfat to Pardes Chana, he spent a good hour just talking about his kids. He was so proud of each of them. And in retirement, he was looking to deepen this connection. You were blessed with an amazing, loving, accepting, and supportive father. And we know that his memory, his values will be a part of everything you do in life. Our deepest sympathies. And this past Hanukkah, Ron and Carmela were blessed with the arrival of Liam. As I sat with the family yesterday to speak about Ron's legacy, the sound of Liam chattering in the background was such a comfort. Liam, with the next generation, will grow to learn of Ron's legacy, to be inspired by the great man who was the rock and the glue of the family he loved. In his Siddur, Rabbi Ron wrote about death. He wrote about Judaism's rituals which attempt to bring peace to the experience of death. They allow us to come to terms with the reality of mortality, to complete the unfinished business of the relationships that still need healing. And these rituals express the wish that one's closest relations who are being left behind will be safe and cared for. Ron has left a family, a community, and so many friends who feel blessed because he was in our lives. As the sages say, tzadikim b'mitatan kriyin chayim, that the righteous, even in death, are considered to be living. Rabbi Ron Aigen will live on in the hearts and the minds of those he inspired. As we remember the soft sound of his voice, the comfort of his embrace, or perhaps even that image of him presiding over his Shabbat table, somehow balancing that cup of blessing, the blessing that was his life. May the mourners find comfort in his legacy, and may his memory be a blessing for family and friends. Yehi Zichro Baruch. And let us say, Amen. Please rise for the memorial prayer.
El malei rachamim, shochen bameromim, hametzeh menucha nechona al kanfei hashechinah. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת מורנו הרב ראובן שמואל בן יוסף ומרים שהלך לעולמו בעבור שכל משפחתו וכל קהילתו הקדושה וכולנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמתו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
May the Almighty grant Rabbi Ron Aigen, Rav Reuven Shmuel ben Yosef v'Miriam, his place in paradise. May his memory be a blessing for all those whose lives he touched. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. The Shiva will take place here at the synagogue on Tuesday and Wednesday, including Mincha Maariv services at 7:30 p.m. It will continue at the home 4459 Oxford Avenue, through Sunday evening. And the Shiva hours at the home are Thursday from 2 to 4, 7 to 9, Friday 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., and Sunday 2 to 4 and 7 to 9, with services on Thursday and Sunday evenings at 7:30 p.m., and all that information is available on the congregation's website. The burial will take place at the congregation Dor She'emet Reconstructionist Section, Eternal Garden Cemetery in Beaconsfield. And at this time, I'll ask everyone to please remain in your places. We'll invite the president and the past presidents of Dor She'emet to stand at the head of the recessional. We'll invite Ron's rabbinic colleagues to stand as well in front of the casket, and we'll invite the pallbearers to please step forward. For those looking for directions to the cemetery, there are staff members of Papermans who are available and have directions as well. There will be 3 buses leaving that will come back here after the burial that are right next to the synagogue.